take it.
Miracle. I'll take it.
We'll take it.
Mhm.
Great. Thank you, Janet. Let me make sure I'm sharing the screen here. We're going to start the recording and get things underway. So we are continuing with chapter 22. The section today is entitled Reason and the Forms of Error. And I think it's a very good title for reasons that'll become obvious as we get into it. I'm going to do a brief summary of what we will encounter today. So here's the broad contours of the way the healing process is described in A Course in Miracles. First, there's some kind of trigger, something that evokes a visceral response or an ego interpretation arises in your mind because you get triggered. And it's very important. Now we're focusing on how the miracle worker responds to this. Then the miracle worker takes a pause because that response from the ego, we can't let that run away, let our thoughts run away with that. So there's a pause and a turning to your higher self, your inner self, asking for help and seeking spiritual reason to understand what's going on here. And that's an expression of a willingness to change your mind, to allow spiritual reason to guide you rather than your initial visceral response and ego interpretation. Then you can choose again based on a vision that we call the holy vision. It's the light that the Holy Spirit shines on the situation. So that is a generalization of how it always works. A trigger, an ego response, a pause, a request for help, a turning within, and then because you're willing to see things in a new light, you change direction and choose in the direction of the Holy Spirit. Now, we know we don't always exercise that. Many times we have a trigger and a visceral ego interpretation and run down that path for too long. And as I've said many times, pay attention to how that feels. And if it starts to feel all cold and anxious and fearful inside, that's an indication you need to pause and ask for help. So what we will read today is that the ego teaches that these triggers, these mistakes that we sometimes make are sin. This is the ego's teaching. And it teaches that they last forever, that they can't be corrected nor forgiven. So the guilt from making from error, it would be permanent. This is what the ego teaches. And that's all used to, it's a belief system that would hold you back, block your mind, and keep it focusing on specific forms in the world that you have a problem with, that you have grievances with. Focusing on those forms, and particularly when others are the source of those matters, those triggers, and keep us in the mode of projecting our guilt out onto others and seeing them as the problem, the source of the problem. So that's what the ego does. To undo that means to change your mind about those beliefs. And to do that, we introduce spiritual reason into the ego's thought system. Here's a key point. We're introducing spiritual reason not up into the Holy Spirit's thought system. It's already been there. We're introducing spiritual reason into the ego's thought system where it's needed. And then reason is able to see through the situation, the external forms and the mistakes, and see it more clearly, see what's obvious in the spiritual realm, and bring a meaningful understanding into that situation where before there was no understanding. And so this all results in spiritual reason seeing a holy relationship between people for what it is. This is a great definition for a holy relationship. It's a common state of mind where both participants give up their errors in exchange for correction, that they may both be healed as one. So willingness to give up the errors so that we might correct that, come into a common state of mind and be healed as one. So we're going to read more detail about all that just in a moment, but first let's have a word of prayer. So Holy Spirit, we open our minds to being taught how we can correct the errors and the triggers that oftentimes ensnare us and that we mistakenly give our faith and power to. We're willing to be taught to correct and change our mind and heal and join with others as one. And we count on your guidance for helping us in this learning journey. Thank you, sweet Spirit, for your guidance. Amen and amen. And thank you, Brother David, for your willingness to help the group with reading.
The introduction of reason into the ego's thought system is the beginning of its undoing. For reason and the ego are contradictory, nor is it possible for them to coexist in your awareness. For reason's goal is to make plain and therefore obvious. You can see reason. This is not a play on words, for here is the beginning of a vision that has meaning. Vision is sense, quite literally. If it is not the body's sight, it must be understood, for it is plain, and what is obvious is not ambiguous. It can be understood. And here do reason and the ego separate to go their separate ways.
Mm-hmm. So as we said just a moment ago, we are introducing, this course is introducing spiritual reason into the ego's thought system for the purposes of undoing our belief in the ego's thought system. Reason and the ego's thought system contradict one another, and they can't both coexist in your awareness. Spiritual reason is the beginning of the end for the ego's grip on your thinking. And this spiritual reason has a purpose. It's purposeful, and it is to make plain and obvious the things that you couldn't see under the ego's darkness. It's to make it plain and obvious, to ultimately to help you to understand what really matters. And as we said yesterday, to help you understand the difference between what is the same and what is different, to make that distinction. There is an important distinction that we will repeat again and again until you are able to internalize it for yourself. And that's the distinction between outward physical forms that we see with our physical eyes. I'm talking plain, see things with your physical eyes outwardly in some kind of form. But seeing those things and not really understanding what we're seeing, not really having any kind of insight into the matter, just being able to detect it on the physical plane. We want to make a distinction between that and true understanding, where spiritual vision is comes from your soul, from your higher self, where spiritual vision shines and gives meaning to the situation. So, to use an example that Jerry shared just a moment ago, on the outer physical world, sometimes things are about a conversation about people, about money, and people that know each other but feel like the transaction might not have gone the way we thought it would. That's what it seems like on the outer physical world. But as Jerry illustrated, there's also a spiritual dynamic going on that has more meaning to our soul, and it requires that a level of understanding on the inner plane. And that's where spiritual vision comes into play. That's what enables healing to happen, is that we begin to understand it's not just about that outer physical domain. There's also an interior process at work here. And then being vigilant to keep in mind that that's actually happening all the time. Every encounter you have is an invitation for you to recognize your brother as holy. Okay, so we'll go on. David?
The ego's whole continuance depends on its belief you cannot learn this course. Share this belief, and reason will be unable to see your errors and make way for their correction. For reason sees through errors. Telling you what you thought was real is not. Reason can see the difference between sin and mistakes because it wants correction. Therefore, it tells you what you thought was uncorrectable can be corrected, and thus it must have been an error. The ego's opposition to correction leads to its fixed belief in sin and disregard of errors. It looks on nothing that can be corrected. Thus does the ego damn and reason save.
So we have a couple what we'll call tenets of the ego's religion here. It depends on a false belief that you cannot learn this course. And so I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, if any of you entertain even some thoughts that you cannot learn this course, I want you to place that on my shoulders. For in other words, I'm asking you to trust that that's a mistake and hold me accountable. So if you have that belief, talk to me later and we'll make an agreement, because that's what that keeps the ego going. The belief that you cannot learn this course. And we want to remove that barrier. That's one that we can remove. And it's not that I can do that, but I can illustrate through these materials, how reason will see through these errors and through these mistakes. How, if we can give you the sight, the vision that spiritual reason makes possible, you'll understand for yourself how to learn this course, and that you can correct the errors. Which brings us to the bigger point. The ego teaches that your beliefs, that your mistaken beliefs about the world and life and guilt and all that cannot be corrected, that they are fixed, that your mind cannot change. This is the meaning of sin, the belief that your mind can't change, that you're stuck, unforgivable, and therefore there's no hope. In a mind that could never change and that believes it was wrong, there would be no hope. So we want to show all that to be untrue. Many of us have believed that and we're taught that, but we want to be sure that we can dispel these myths so that they no longer, and not only at the level of your intellect, but deeper down into your subconscious mind, the thoughts you really share privately with yourself, we want to correct it on that level too. How? Through the light that spiritual reason will bring to our minds. So let me pause there and see if there's any comments. By the way, we don't have a lot of reading material tonight. So plenty of room for comments if you'd like. Jane, you had your hand up.
I think for me, in my process of progress, is really being firm with the fact that I'm the one that has put this belief in the ego, that it is a total illusion. And so I have to be firm with that. I have to be vigilant with that, because even though we give reason to the ego's not going to lie down gently with that at all. And all the reason that we give it is wonderful, and turning over to the Holy Spirit, because it's not form that we want to correct. It's our mind that we want to know that that we are truly spirit. And it cannot be done with being gentle at all with the ego. It just can't be. I guess you'd say the ego's already come in for his home run, or thinks he has, but actually he truly hasn't. We're just the one that dropped the ball. So I have to continuously tell myself, you dropped the ball, pick it up and run, and you come in for the home run. So that's part of my journey for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. I really like what you said there, Jane, that you're echoing the idea, I am responsible for my sight, and I have to be vigilant about that. It's up to me to decide. Felicia?
Yeah, I wasn't going to comment on this, but I decided I would, because that is what I feel through my study of the course that ego has beat me up the worst on, as like, you are not able to learn this. You know, it just seems like come up into my mind constantly. Like, you're not getting this, you don't know what you're reading, you don't know what you're looking at, you know. But I know in my mind, my right mind, that I am learning it, and I am understanding, and I'm growing and on the path. But it seems like that's like that's my weak spot or something. Like I guess because I'm not formally educated or something. So it like, okay, we'll attack that part of her, you know. Yeah, no, I just thought I'd throw that in there. So, but I'm not giving in.
No,
I am spirit, like Jane said.
yes.
The ego cannot convince me of anything.
Yeah.
Not my mind.
Well, that's just great. You said, well, that's where the ego is going to attack. So now we see what it's up to, and we can call it on that. It's constantly telling not only you, Felicia, there's a reason why this line is in there. This is for many of us. I think everybody at some point has believed they could not learn this course. After I read the first five chapters of the textbook, that's where I was at. I don't know what I'm doing here. So yes, so this, hang in there. There's believe not the lie. Heather?
Yeah, I like what Felicia just said. That was very helpful. And Felicia, what helps me is when I come across stuff that I don't understand, that's like speaking Spanish and I have no idea what it said. As I just trust, I say, you know what, my soul understands it. And right now I'm feeding my soul. And if my mind doesn't understand, it doesn't matter. But there's a higher part of me that does. And it's to that one that this is speaking. And I will understand it at some point. I'll grow into the understanding. But right now it's true. And my soul knows it. And I'm feeding my soul that truth. And I will understand it at some point.
Beautiful. This affirmation of trust. Yes. Wow, a lot of hands keep going up. Janet.
Yeah, I sat in a room when I first started the course, and I had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. And they weren't exactly explaining much, but there was an energy in the room. There was something that felt like love to me. And I kept going. I got very little out of it the whole time I went, but I never missed it. I was always going because I felt a love in the room. So I knew they had something. So that's what I want to say.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Janet. Jane?
I think the most important thing that came to me was that in the course, and it really is emphasized, and I think it gets missed a lot, is we don't have to understand it. Our understanding will come perfectly through the experience of it. And that's the key word, is the experience.
Yes.
That's what's going to bring us to our understanding. And that's why the workbook is so good, because Jesus says, just do it. Whether you understand it or not, just do it. And then the experience will come through that. And I think that's it's just so heartening, It makes the course so joyful that I don't have to struggle to understand this. If I had to understand it when I first began in the course, I wouldn't be in the course anymore. I truly wouldn't, because it was too frightening for me, number one. And number two, I had no clue what they were talking about. So it's great that, Janet, that was an experience. You felt the love, and that's your experience.
Mm-hmm. That's great, Jane. Thank you. You will understand your own experiences, and that is the proof. Kathy?
What I do, because I too get confused by the course, but I accept the fact that the atonement is for everyone, including me, and that we are all equals and we are all equally loved. So what I do is I go back to the basics. Whenever I get like confused and it's like Heather was saying, I know a part of me understands it, but maybe I don't at that moment. I go back to some very simple basics, like, like only love is real, that kind of thing. And I just go back to those. And then I know I'm safe. I know I trust that all this is going to work out. That's what I do.
Mhm. Thank you. And we'll take one more comment. Richie, do you want to make a comment? You're on mute still. You're on mute still, Richie. All right. Technology here. Well, I might have just try it one more time, Richie. There you
How
go.
about now?
There you go.
Yeah, when I'm alone, I'm a saint. And when I get out there on the road with
You fucked it up! You fucked it up! You're in the backseat! You're in the backseat holding him down! You fucking...
All right.
hello,
So that's what we call a Zoom bomb. And we'll they had nothing. Thank them for coming by and dropping in on us. Richie, it's your microphone.
my ego didn't seem to be affected by that. I thought it was pretty funny. It
Yes.
reminded me of some of my antics when I was a kid, wanting to be in control. And what was said, and you said it, you took it away from me. Reason and ego separate, they go their separate ways. That's cool. I see that when my ego is going, when it's separating, I'm in a land, a foreign land.
Right.
And what it is I feel vulnerable. And what I did, my friend even said it to me today. He said, Richie, why are you always second guessing yourself? And I'm doing this because I've never done this. I just attack and attack and attack. Get. And I'm changing that through this work, but it really is completely foreign to me. But to become vulnerable, and if I'm not, it's like boxing. I boxed when I was a kid, and if you throw a punch, you got to get ready for a punch back. So words became my attack, my punch, and no one is throwing punches back at me. And I'm saying, what's wrong? Because this is completely foreign to me. It really is. I guess what I'm saying, and the Beatles said it, nowhere man, always moving, but going nowhere. And the reason, when I start to reason now, it takes me to my Holy Spirit, and I know it's okay. It reaches that spot deep down inside of me that it is beyond words.
Beautiful.
And I'm not trying to be beautiful. This
No,
is just
but
what's going on.
It's encouraging to me. Thank you, Rich. I'm witnessing it to your experience there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to go on. David?
Reason is not salvation in itself, but it makes way for peace and brings you to a state of mind in which salvation can be given you. Sin is a block, set like a heavy gate, locked and without a key across the road to peace. No one who looks on it without the help of reason would try to pass it. The body's eyes behold it as solid granite, so thick it would be madness to attempt to pass it. Yet reason sees through it easily because it is an error. The form it takes cannot conceal its emptiness from reason's eyes.
So this image of a block set like a heavy gate locked in without a key set across the road to peace. This image will come up again because this entire program is intended to remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. So these are blocks, and what are they? Blocks, they are beliefs and thoughts and feelings that are mistaken beliefs. They need not be there, but our mind has given faith and belief to them. And therefore, that influences how we feel about ourselves and about the world. And what reason does is it clears the way on the road to peace, because it helps you to see that these images of error and of darkness and of guilt of the ego need not be there. They are not realities. They are but mistaken thoughts. It comes from a mistaken thought system. And the form then of the block, no matter how big it appears, we learn not to be preoccupied about the details of these forms, these ideas in our mind. We learn instead to look for what is true and distinguish that between what is false. And once we see that something's false, then we can reorient ourselves towards the truth and simply relinquish any faith we were giving to that which is false. It's a letting go, a relinquishing of misplaced faith in these blocks that look like heavy gates locked without a key across the road to peace. David?
Only the form of error attracts the ego, meaning it does not recognize and does not see if it is there or not. Everything the body's eyes can see is a mistake, an error in perception, a distorted fragment of the whole without the meaning that the whole would give. And yet mistakes, regardless of their form, can be corrected. Sin is but error in a special form the ego venerates. It would preserve all errors and make them sins, for here is its own stability, its heavy anchor in the shifting world it made, the rock on which its church is built, and where its worshipers are bound to bodies, believing the body's freedom is their own.
So we're going to unpack this a little bit because it's true in a general case. And if you can see it in one case, then you can trust that it's true in the general case. And here's the idea that the body's eyes sees things through distortion. It sees individual elements, fragments of the whole, and then it pieces together an interpretation based on what it sees of the fragment. And therefore, it makes up a story about the situation based on limited data. And what I've tried to illustrate that is to say, what is the story here on the screen? What is the meaning that it has? And you should come to the conclusion that it has no meaning whatsoever because it's just a little jigsaw puzzle, but we have no concept of the big picture here. We don't know what it's a part of. We could take guesses, but we don't know. And so this is what physical sight does. It sees fragments and then builds a story around it, an interpretation that is entirely your own. Two people can see the exact same thing and come up with an entirely different interpretation of it. So, and that is a mistake, to impose your own interpretation on a situation. You're actually projecting your own memories and impressions and judgments onto a situation. It happens all the time. It's the nature of perception. Psychologists do experiments to illustrate that this is true. So we call them mistakes that can be, this is a mistake in interpreting that can be corrected. But the ego has a different rendering to that same mistake. It says it's a sin in that it cannot, that mistakes, once they are made, are permanent. And so this is an attempt for the ego to anchor itself in your thinking and cause you to believe that once you've done something wrong, the guilt lasts, it remains with you. And so we talked yesterday about false concepts of self, and how if you feel guilty for something years ago, the ego would teach that you still carry that bad karma, that guilt with you. This is the rock on which the ego's church is built. We mean symbolically. It's part of its religion, is that mistakes once made damn you for permanently. Well, that's a pretty bleak thought system now that we've exposed that. Who would want to hold on to that set of beliefs? No reason to do that. David, what would reason tell us?
Reason will tell you that the form of error is not what makes it a mistake. If what the form conceals is a mistake, the form cannot prevent correction. The body's eyes see only form. They cannot see beyond what they were made to see. And they were made to look on error and not see past it. Theirs is indeed a strange perception, for they can see only illusions, unable to look beyond the granite block of sin and stopping at the outside form of nothing. To this distorted form of vision, the outside of everything, the wall that stands between you and the truth, is wholly true. Yet how can sight that stops at nothingness, as if it were a solid wall, see truly? It is held back by form, having been made to guarantee that nothing else but form will be perceived.
So we've heard this message before. The ego, the body's eyes sees only form, sees a physical form. We knew that. The body sees the physical world. The ego would say that's all that you're supposed to see. End of story. See fragments, and then your mind can fill in the rest. And that's where that's where projection occurs. That's where our ego interpretations come in. What we're learning is that there's something beyond the physical realm called the soul that is capable of vision, which has a deeper understanding of what things mean to you and to others, what things mean in terms of our function here as healers. And that's the level where you discover your true self. And so the Course is not opposed to what your physical eyes see, but it does point out the mistake of believing that's all there is to the situation. And so how does this abstract idea apply to you in your life in the next 24 hours? That's a good question to ask about almost anything in the Course. Will this appear in my life anytime soon? What's the application? Well, yes, you're likely to have an encounter with somebody. Maybe it's just thoughts about somebody, and those thoughts will come up, and all the details around that situation will be there in memory. All the form of it will be there. And that's what we called earlier a potential trigger. And then immediately the ego would have you narrow down and only focus on your view of that trigger and impose all of your projections on top of it. Well, when that happens, and I'm confident within the next 3 days that'll happen to everybody, that when that happens, immediately you should feel in your being a shift into that narrow tunnel. Here's where the guilt begins. Here's where fear arises. You'll feel that shift. And when that happens, either you're going to continue in that direction, or you're going to pause and ask for help in seeing this differently. And that makes all the difference in the world, because that's where the beginning of our healing in any situation arises, when we're before going deeper into the tunnel, we pause and ask for help. Susie?
So I have a little bit of a miracle that applies to this, but I was off camera, and of course I was supposed to wait anyway. So you just said we were going to encounter something like this. So David and I, I had rotator cuff surgery, so I haven't played golf in 6 months. And David and I on the golf course didn't used to do very well together because our egos would get very much heightened and triggered. And we couldn't figure it out years ago, but after starting to take the course, we totally knew what was going on. So this past Sunday, we went out and I was able to play about 5 holes. And at the end, we were both triggered for exactly what our physical eyes could see. And we were both getting in a little bit of a ego heightened state. And we were able to look at each other and say, oh my goodness, look at this. Our egos are attacking each other. We're in our ego states, and we could look at this differently. And this is not our higher selves. We're playing golf with our ego lower states. And we could see exactly it playing out. So it's like my brother and me, right? We could see it playing out like we were watching it. It was really hilarious it wasn't hilarious when we were in it, but right when we could figure it out, it was pretty hilarious. And we made a deal to, if we ever go out and play again, to say, okay, we're going out with our higher selves. We're not going out with our ego selves. And you know what? It was a total miracle, really, because it was a complete shift in our thinking. And it was a total awareness of we could be one way or we could be the other way.
Mhm.
And we recognized, the miracle was that we recognized pretty quickly what was going on and then could apply the course. And then instead of coming home and being in that anger triggered state, it was all gone. We were peaceful and it was really very cool. So that was a miracle, and it really speaks to kind of what this says. It was such a distorted form of vision. It wasn't true. That's it.
Lovely. So this is rhetorical questions for the others. Thank you for sharing that, Susie. Was all that really about golf? No, but we would say the golf was the form or the format in which it occurred. But we could probably come up with a dozen other formats where those types of feelings and triggers, a lot of times when there's competition, sporting where we're keeping score, could be tennis, could be any variety of different activities. So what you guys were able to see underneath it is that there's really a bigger lesson here. And so that way, golf is your teacher. I guess golf is teacher for a lot of people. Thank you for sharing that, Susie. All right, we'll go on. David?
These eyes, made not to see, will never see. For the idea they represent left not its maker, and it is their maker that sees through them. What was its maker's goal but not to see? For this, the body's eyes are perfect means, but not for seeing. See how the body's eyes rest on externals and cannot go beyond? Watch how they stop at nothingness, unable to go beyond the form to meaning. Nothing so blinding as perception of form. For sight of form means understanding has been obscured. Only mistakes have different forms, and so they can deceive. You can change form because it is not true. It could not be reality because it can be changed. Reason will tell you that if form is not reality, it must be an illusion and is not there to see. And if you see it, you must be mistaken, for you are seeing what cannot be real as if it were. What cannot see beyond what is not there must be distorted perception and must perceive illusions as the truth. Could it then recognize the truth?
Okay, so we're still focusing on the distinction between the form that the body's eyes see and being able to see beyond the form. And so Susie's golf example is helpful. The body's eyes could certainly rest on the idea that this was about the score or the performance in golf and all those details about missed putts and things like that. And it would be very easy to keep going down that tunnel and not go beyond that, period. Before A Course in Miracles, this is what most of us would do, is we just get to that point and would see nothing else. The Course says that they're stopping short of the lesson. They're stopping at nothingness, unable to go beyond the form to the meaning that's underneath it which we would think of as the lesson to be learned in that situation. And so in that situation, the form has resulted in understanding has been obstructed by the form if we don't go beyond the form. So how would you apply this? In every situation that you have this week, that where there's feelings and emotions that rise, there's form involved, but realize there's something deeper in terms of a meaning about your own healing journey and the person that you're having this experience with, and being willing to use spiritual reason to go beyond, to say, oh, well, I know there's more to this than the form. Let me pause for a moment and ask for understanding. And the bigger lesson here, which is very difficult to understand, Julie S., I know we've talked about this before, is the Course says that those forms that keep changing, so the same lesson sometimes has to be taught multiple times because we didn't get it the first time. And so the form of the lesson might change, but until the underlying meaning is understood. And what the Course says is when the form keeps changing, that means it's not real. The form is not the reality of the situation. It's just the surface features of it. And so we learn to put not our faith into the surface features, but instead turn our faith and the power of our attention towards what is the lesson God would have me learn in this situation. You can tell that it's not real because it could not be reality if it keeps changing. Things that keep changing, we discussed this in over the weekend. That which continues to change is merely surface. Reality, creation never changes, and you learn to make that distinction there. Reason will tell you that as form is not reality, it must be an illusion. Okay, these eyes have cried. These eyes have seen a lot of love, but they're never gonna see another one like they had with you. We're gonna go on, David.
Let not the form of his mistakes keep you from him whose holiness is yours.
Could you read that again? That was so beautiful.
Let not the form of his mistakes keep you from him whose holiness is yours. Let not the vision of his holiness, the sight of which would show you your forgiveness, be kept from you by what the body's eyes can see. Let your awareness of your brother not be blocked by your perception of his sins and of his body. What is there in him that you would attack except what you associate with his body, which you believe can sin? Beyond his errors is his holiness and your salvation. You gave him not his holiness, but tried to see your sins in him to save yourself. And yet, his holiness is your forgiveness. Can you be saved by making sinful the one whose holiness is your salvation?
Wow, it's really touching. So we said earlier that the block that in the ego's religion, our judgments, our sense of guilt, our grievances with others are intended to be permanent blocks so that they hold us back, sometimes for years. And here the appeal is, let not the form of these mistakes keep you from him whose holiness is yours. Let not your forgiveness stop at the mistaken forms, which are merely life situations there for you to learn a lesson. Let your learning not stop there and be blocked. Let it go on with spiritual reason so that you recognize that this is but a situation for your good, for your healing. It may not be experienced as pleasant in the moment. Oftentimes why? Because the things that really get our attention are the things that are unpleasant. We tend to learn the most from situations that are unpleasant. It doesn't have to be that way, but that's the way that'll get your attention. And let not your forgiveness be blocked by your perception of your brother's grievances, which focuses all on the form. There's one idea that goes a little deeper here. Why does the ego want to keep your focus on on grievances towards your brother? Why is that it wants to keep us blocked by that? Well, it's because it wants you to try to see your own flaws in the other person and thus keep you pristine. Make them the flawed one so that you don't have to do your own inner work. This is spiritual bypass, is so that you can make them guilty. And then, so the obvious question, can you be saved by making sinful the one whose holiness is your salvation? No, it's impossible. We need to reverse that. Richie had a comment.
I'm there and I lose it because my ego is always looking for a fall guy. It's you're at fault, not me. And I can see that. I know I had a mentor, and he would say, compare yourself to yourself. So I was on to something. As long as I'm reading it, it resonates, especially in this last paragraph. But when I take my eyes off it, my ego shows up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I've been waiting, you've been talking, I'm waiting to come back. And it's like, I don't know, and that's the false self. I said to someone the other day, and it wasn't an idea of my own, it was, I said, try to see behind your eyes.
Yeah.
And he looked at me like I was crazy. Like I wasn't, and this is saying that,
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah, it is.
It just happens and happens. But the quieter I am, I find the truth. I see that the truth is, I find in silence. But the ego wants to do like we do fist bumps, or if I walked into a nightclub and nobody was talking, I wouldn't want to stay. It seems like my ego always wants entertainment. And silence is just walking through, and it's cool where I really supposed to be. It's so foreign to me that I've got to, it's almost like an involuntary tremor. If I hold my arm out, so long, at first it's fine, and then it begins to shake, and then to tremble, and I can't keep it up. And that's the same thing with my ego. It has to find some way, some type of I don't know. You know what I'm saying more than I know what I'm saying, and I know I'm onto something. I can't take it any further.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Richie. All right, just for as a lead into the next paragraph, the question here was, can we be saved by making the other person be the fall guy? The person who really has the opportunity to point us to our salvation? So, oh, I'm sorry, Susie, you had your hand up?
Oh, I thought you were asking that question. Is that a lead into the next paragraph?
Yeah.
Because I just wanted to say that that prior paragraph is exactly what was going on with me and David. He was making me wrong, I was making him wrong, so I didn't have to look at myself or take my responsibility or blah, 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 blah. And actually, what was amazing is, no, I can't be saved. I can only be saved by forgiving him and seeing him as a holy, innocent child of God and vice versa. And when we did that, we were both saved and everything was fine. And it's just, this is exactly what was going on. It's just fascinating and you know?
It is very much, this is where you learn this course, Susie, is you tie it to your own experiences and you say, oh, there I am. That's me. I've experienced that. I know what that feels like. I know what that process looks like and how it can be turned around.
And this is how I know where peace and freedom is, because
Yeah.
that's what occurs, peace and freedom,
Yes.
when the ego isn't hijacked and involved.
Right, right. Beautiful. Heather?
Yeah, I just like with what Susie said. It reminds me when we had classes, we'd have the lab, which was theory. I mean, we'd have the course that was theory, and then you'd go out and have the lab where you actually practiced it. And this is what we get to do. Life is the lab where we go out and practice all the stuff we're learning.
Life is a lab for sure. Jane?
I just want to go back to what Susie said in the very beginning about the conflict that was sort of going on in the minds and everything. I think the most incredible part of her words was the fact that she definitely joined forgiveness and miracle. They are exactly the same thing. And we forget that, or I shouldn't say we, I can forget that, because forgiveness doesn't see any sin, no judgment. And that's what the miracle does. It looks on the conflict, but it reminds us that it's not reality. And I thought that was so cool. And she used the word miracle and forgiveness. I forget that sometimes. They're really synonymous. Is what they are. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. So our question was, can you be saved by focusing on another person's issues? David?
A holy relationship, however newly born, must value holiness above all else. Unholy values will produce confusion. I don't understand this next three words the way they're written, and in awareness. Can you, unholy values will produce confusion and unawareness?
Keep reading, and I'm going to check to make sure I didn't make a typo here.
No, it's the book. It's in that way in the book. I still didn't understand it.
Well, we'll unpack it in a second.
In an unholy relationship, each one is valued because he seems to justify the other's sin. Each sees within the other what impels him to sin against his will. And thus he lays his sins upon the other and is attracted to him to perpetuate his sins. And so it must become impossible for each to see himself as causing sin by his desire to have sin real. Yet reason sees a holy relationship as what it is, a common state of mind, where both give errors gladly to correction, that both may happily be healed as one.
So this is one of the easiest ways for me to understand a holy relationship. A common state of mind involves more than one person, you and another person, where both give errors gladly to be corrected, that they may happily be healed as one. Maybe you'll be on the golf course while you're doing it, or maybe you'll be at the bowling alley, or maybe you'll be at the coffee table. It doesn't matter. The form, the details don't matter, but the desire for this common state of mind, that both may be happy to be healed as one, that's a choice. It's not forced upon you. It's a choice. So holy relationships must value that path above all else. Because we know if we don't value it, then we will easily be distracted by other things. As to this sentence here, David, I don't know. I have to see if something comes right now. Unholy must value holiness above all else. Unholy values will produce confusion and inawareness. Confusion and awareness. So anybody feel free to jump in here.
I think it means confusion in awareness. So in other words, total confusion, even about awareness. That's what I'm reading it as.
Yeah, so
I think it's an error that simply needs correction in the grammar and the syntax there.
it may be. So I don't know if I want to get off into that right now, but I'm going to try it real quick and see if I can real quickly see if in one of the other versions. Oh, here it is. Yeah, found it right away. And oh, in an earlier version, David, see if this rings comfortably for you.
Mhm.
This is rendered as unholy values will produce confusion and unawareness.
That's what I said.
Yes.
Remember I said I thought it should be unawareness, but it reads in awareness.
Yeah. All right. So that makes perfect sense there.
Thank you.
It's a single letter change. I for you, and then it was split into two words. So yeah.
Yeah, it's just an error that needed correction.
Right. Yeah, that's all it is. I know because I was involved in a proofreading project once for somebody else's book. You have to take a really slow time. We had 20 people involved, looking at every word and every letter and everything. It's an enormous undertaking. Before going to press, to print, it's an enormous, this is why these things happen, because usually you don't have 20 people available to proofread these things. And all kinds of people are involved in getting it ready. It's different today in a modern era because one person can produce the whole thing on their computer. But back in this was originally printed in the mid 70s. Back in that time, there were typewriters. and then there were transfers of things. So yeah, those things happen. Enough said. Other comments here. That's as far as we're going to go with the reading. Okay, so what is the message here? It comes down to, what do you want? What do you desire? Do you desire a common state of mind? I've had people that I know that were not per se Course in Miracles student, but they were just really preferred harmony, a harmonious state of mind with other people. And that was their value system. And they just wanted a common state of mind. And they were glad to correct any errors that might come up along the way, because they preferred to be happy and united as one. And so if we can internalize that is what we most want above all else, I am determined to see things differently. I'm determined to find happiness and healing and oneness in my relationship. Then that ultimately will change our thoughts and decisions and our behaviors in life. Final comments. I just want to go back and review a little bit about what we said today here. So this healing process always involves forms and details that the eye sees, and then some kind of response that's associated with the ego's interpretation of the situation. So this is where mistakes happen first. The ego speaks first. Then we get to, if we are alert to it and practicing, we are invited to take a pause. Wait a minute. What is this really about? Ask for help and understanding. What's going on here? This is a learning situation, and I just got triggered, and I'm feeling like this other person is the cause of the problem. Wow, this is familiar. This is what it looks like. So now I don't want to feel that way, feel grievances towards the other person. I would gladly change my mind and choose again to realize that all these are projections of my own self-criticism outward onto the other person. The ego, however, would teach that those mistakes are, that you're stuck with it, that they're permanent blocks, and that they cannot be corrected or forgiven, and that they hold you back, and that you should focus more attention on the specific details of the mistake involved, and then keep replaying it in your mind, and just go into what I call looping. Heather, there's probably a better term for it in psychology than looping, but recycling there. And then in that process, project guilt, continue to project guilt onto the other person. But we are learning to undo these cycles, that we have to introduce reason into the ego's thought system. Right there in the midst of the triggering phenomena, we invite spiritual reason in, and that helps us to see that there's something bigger going on here, which is a spiritual lesson. The surface level form is not what is really, life is not about those surface level things. And so this is a way of asking for understanding, to bring meaning to this situation. And then if you stay with that, reason will show you that, in fact, We are here to have holy relationships with one another. And that really is what our heart desires, a common state of mind where all of us can give up our errors and be healed and return to a state of inner peace and oneness. David, you had a comment? Your mic, check your mic, David. You're unmuted, but there you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
So I'm piggybacking on something that Susie brought up earlier. You know, one of the things that we strive for in life is a holy relationship. And I remember reading about special relationships, and you know that most romantic involvements are special relationships, I think. And I remember I used to get so upset when Susie would say, "This is you want a special relationship. That's not what I want." And I didn't quite get it. You know, my ego was offended by that, upset. And you know what's so amazing is that through this course and through the work that both she and I have done, we have evolved into a holy relationship much of the time, because we have a common state of mind in which we can each see our own errors, see the reason for correction, talk to the other person, forgive ourselves and forgive the other person, and both be happily healed as one. And no greater example was the other day that she brought up, but it's something that's occurring all the time.
Mhm.
And I just want to add that testimony to the virtues of this course and how it can transform a relationship in humans.
Wow, David, that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Yes. And that common state of mind can be experienced outside of outside of close, intimate relationships. It can be experienced whenever two people decide that that's what matters, that they're recognizing their holy relationship matters. Thank you for sharing that, my brother. Richie?
Yeah, just real quick. I know it's just about closing time. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
What I've noticed with this work, and I go to a 12-step meetings, and they want you to like line item every wrong that you have ever done or you think you've done. And that's okay. But what I'm saying, when I do this work, I am no longer my past. It seems to just evaporate because I'm in the moment.
Yeah.
And I'm not carrying all the drugs I used, all the people I've crossed, all the conflicts. There is no conflict. It seems to suck all of that stuff away, all the past drama. And I don't know anything about boy and girl, let's say holy or sober relationships. All I know when I do this work, I'm in touch with something much bigger than my ego. And it just puts me right where I was always supposed to be. I don't know if you can get something out of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm open to feedback. I'm here to do therapy too.
Yeah. We are all right where we are supposed to be. And
Richie, you're in a holy relationship with all of us.
Thank you.
All right, my friends. Well, thank you reason and the forms of error. We look at every situation through different eyes here, or know that there's an understanding and a meaning that goes deeper than the form of those things that used to trigger us, and maybe sometimes still trigger. We're not free of being triggered as yet, but we're able to correct along the way, and that's the path to healing. So thank you all. Namaste.
Namaste. Thanks, Jonica.
Very
Thanks,
well.
everybody.
Love you all.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jonica.
Oh, Heather and Kathy, can you hang around?
Yeah.
Good night, all.